the big thing that I would say to invest a lot of resources and time in is creating content assets, because really at the end of the day, that's going to be the foundation that holds an SEO campaign together. And that even applies on the local level too, because I know some local businesses think they can get away with not creating content, but just think about it this way. Most local businesses are not creating content. So if you are the local business that steps up and becomes the authority in your space, at least on the local level, maybe even nationally, you're just going to dominate everyone in your local area.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer from Digital Triggers, and welcome to another episode of Show Me the Nuggets. So today I'm actually not sitting in the office, but I'm sitting on the back patio today. So sorry if the sunny weather and the palm trees are a distraction, but please refrain, right? Today we have an awesome guest, Nathan GOTCH from GOTCH SEO. So when my team was looking into Nathan, I'm like, look, all that I know is that this guy puts out some really, really good content, some of the best in the entire SEO industry. And they came back and they're like, yeah, man, the content's really good. But they found another interesting stat that I thought would be cool to share with everybody. And Nathan, that was that you grew GOTCH SEO to multiple six figures in less than 6 months. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was quite some time ago. But yeah, that was from about 2013 to about the middle of 2014. And that's that was an interesting time because I basically lost my job in California. I was doing loss prevention at some store in Beverly Hills and got laid off there. And then I was basically at kind of like a point where I was going to decide if I was going to go all in with my SEO company or just try to keep, stringing it along with a side job or a full-time job. And I decided that I was just going to go full-time, and I literally packed everything I had, which wasn't very much, put it into my car and drove to St. Louis to be with my girlfriend. And then her mom was graceful enough to let me stay at her house for as long as I needed to find a job. But I gave myself a 30-day deadline to find enough clients to be able to support myself, to be able to at least get an apartment. And so there was a lot of fear involved, but that was kind of the catalyst for everything. And it just kind of snowballed after that. I was able to get a lot of clients first. Kind of my first batch of clients was through Craigslist. And then while I was doing a ton of outbound stuff, I was also building up my inbound assets, which were ranking for keywords like St. Louis SEO and Atlanta SEO and things like that. And that ended up being my primary source of leads, a few months later. And then from there, I basically just did full service SEO from 2013 all the way until probably 2016. And that was all I did. I didn't have a training program. I didn't do white label services. I didn't do any of that. And so I learned a lot there. Dog might bark through this, so that might happen a few times.
No worries, all good, man.
But yeah, that's kind of how I got started, and I was able to grow to that $8,333 per month mark, which is six figures, pretty quickly. And that was very exciting because that was obviously far more money than I'd ever made in my life. When you see that, you're like, oh man, well, maybe I can get to 16, maybe I can get to 20. And then you just want to keep going. Cause really, I mean, you're just always going to have that kind of feeling, I guess. So
100%. So I'm curious, your back being against the wall, Nathan, do you think that was like critical in the process for you to make that change and for that kind of transformation, so to speak, to happen?
Yeah, I do. And I get that question a lot with the members of GOTCH SEO Academy. They're like, when should I make that leap? When should I do this? And I always tell them, like, when I made that leap, I was, first of all, young. I didn't have any like big things that I had, big responsibilities. I had a lot of debt, which was obviously a little scary. But no job, no prospects, nothing. So it was really like, okay, well, what's a better time than right now? And so if my situation was different, I probably would have operated differently, and I probably would have gotten to where I am today, but it would have been maybe 2 times, 3 times slower. And so, it's just that you just got to deal with whatever situation you're given ultimately. So
Yeah, I mean, just talking with so many entrepreneurs, I've heard similar stories, right? And really, when their back was against the wall is what made it finally click, right? And made like the crazy transformation happen. And I hate saying transformation because it's so
sure.
overused, right? But
Yeah,
right, like when their back was against the wall is when things got real. And ultimately, very shortly after their lives did completely change forever.
yeah. And there have
So
actually been,
interesting for sure.
yeah. And I was going to say, there have been points in my business where I've actually tried to like tap into that fear element so that I could motivate myself even further. Cause I know how powerful that can actually be. And so one was when my wife and I decided to buy a house. I was like, I'm not buying a house. I'm not going to spend money cause I'm like very frugal. So, but we went and bought this house and I was like, you know what? Let's buy this house because that will give me even more incentive to want to pay this mortgage every single month and want to be able to make that payment. So sometimes I do things like that to literally provoke the fear inside because it really does, at least for me, and it may be a little strange, but for me that seems to be kind of like a good driving force for me. And I actually did the same thing at the end of 2018 when I got rid of all my clients. And that was obviously, most people look at that as like a really stupid decision, but I knew like I had to literally just disconnect from it and go all in on what I was doing. I actually made that same decision at the beginning of this year to end all my white label services as well. So I'm always kind of doing these things to kind of get that, I don't know, like kick in the ass to get going and start doing what's necessary for whatever I'm focusing on at the time.
Yep.
So kind of an extreme method, but it's just kind of what works for me.
No, it works. It works really well. I think fear is good to be able to leverage and to kind of use. But I think as well for me is like also surrounding myself with people that are smarter or doing way bigger things than I am in business, and they make me question status quo. And then if I can combine that with fear, like it's some next level type of gains in the next 90, 120 days.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
When your back was against the wall, so to speak, like what made you pick SEO? Like, did you have some background? Were you doing some research in it? Like, what made you pick that as a channel or an opportunity?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I obviously wasn't like new to SEO when I made this decision. So I actually started tinkering with SEO in 2011 when I was basically just trying to figure out how to make money online. And so I stumbled upon this really, in hindsight, terrible course. It was called Web Colleagues. And it was only $47. And like at the time I was like, man, I don't know if I should pay $47 for this course. It was like the biggest decision of my life. And I was actually going into my senior year of college. And so I went through that course and I did all the things that they recommended, doing paid surveys, writing people's essays for college, which wasn't very cool, just doing pretty much just doing whatever to see what would work. And then one recommendation they had was to start a blog because people were making money blogging, at that time. And so I was like, well, I guess I could try that. So I was college baseball pitcher. So I was like, the only thing I really have any skill in, the only thing that I really understand how to do is to throw a baseball. So I might as well just create a blog around that. And that ended up being like the catalyst for learning SEO. So obviously was struggling to get traffic, struggling to grow it. So then I was doing more research and then stumbled upon SEO. And that was like when I got hooked. And then if, people who've been following me for a while probably heard this story, but I would literally create websites just to test my SEO skills. I wouldn't even care about making money. I would literally just I made like a Bowflex reviews website and TRX reviews. And I was just doing all these different sites just to test it and get better at it. And at that time, obviously I was more like gray hat and kind of like, more questionable SEO tactics, but it was necessary at that time. And so that was kind of my background. And then, but yeah, I was doing a lot of niche sites and I was basically just building up my skills up until the point where kind of everything just kind of met at the right time. So.
Yep. Gotcha. So I'm curious, you mentioned that you closed down your client division and then you closed down your white label division, all to focus on SEO Academy. Why was that?
For me, I have a really hard time juggling a lot of different projects. And so I have to focus. It's really, really hard for me. There are a lot of people that are really good operationally and stuff like that, but I'm good at identifying problems and then trying to solve them. And then I feel like that's kind of like my thing. But for me, the clients, obviously, that's a very tough type of business. And I knew that I could only get to a certain revenue and then that'd be it for me, really. I mean, I'd be pretty much at that point and I would have, I'd be making good money, but I'd be working those 12, 16-hour days constantly. Even if I had the staff, even if I had the infrastructure to manage it, it really isn't going to change much with that. And so I never loved the client model. And so that's why I slowly transitioned into white label services, which was a little bit better. I systemized that much more. It was a lot more focused. And I had really good infrastructure with that. I wasn't working on it a ton, but I started to notice that I was spending time dealing with customer support. I was dealing with a lot of stuff there that was taking away from what I needed to do in the academy. And of course, the academy is a very high profit type of business, and it's also a low time investment as well. So I'm definitely someone who's going to lean more towards business models that would support the lifestyle that I'm interested in. I'm not like someone who's like trying to build the biggest agency or the biggest company in the world. Like I'm not really like motivated by that type of stuff. Yep. So I just really care about a business model that I feel, I can continue to grow and continue to spend time with my wife and my newborn and things like that. So, and I just felt that the academy was a good business model for my personal preferences. So I decided to go all in on it.
100%. That makes total sense. As entrepreneurs, we get really good at solving problems, and that can be good and that can be bad. Very quickly we can have 4, 5, 6 different hustles going on or businesses going on at the same time. So I definitely get that. So like being in the information space and teaching people stuff and selling software, and then also having my own agency, one of the things I've always struggled with is like, how can I really talk about doing SEO and having an agency and advising others how to do it if I'm not doing it myself? Right. Sure. What are your thoughts on that? Right. Because I'm sure that weighed into your decision and you really had to think through this.
Yeah, that was a very tough decision, but I had so much experience with clients at that stage that I could just transition that easily into the course. But now at this point, my experience is coming through the students and some of the side stuff that I'm doing as well. But really, I mean, my system worked 2 years ago and it's going to work now because I've built it to obviously be as evergreen as possible. And so, if my students are going through that process, they're taking action, they're doing what I'm telling them to do, they're going to get those results. And more importantly, I'm going to see the experience that they're going through. And I actually, sometimes I do take on some consulting just to kind of get back into it, or I do some audits and stuff just to kind of get back into the weeds because I need to make sure I'm staying, like my mind is there. I'm staying with that analytical mind and seeing unique situations. So I do take on audits, I do some consulting, but I just know that at this point, I know how much goes into a client campaign that like, I don't even think I can physically do it. It would make me go go crazy. So because I'm like so content centric now that I know how much work goes into that. And like, for example, I just published a blog post today about the top link building services. I spent 3 weeks on that blog post. I mean, like how could you do that for a client unless you had really, really strong infrastructure and a huge team. And that's just really, really hard. And I'm not interested in building that out. So.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I saw that post go out. It was a mammoth, huge post. Huge post. I don't even know how you stay focused on one piece of content for that long. I mean,
trust
that
me.
was huge.
Yeah, trust me, it's not easy. So, but yeah, it's actually not even the length that's so hard. It's just figuring out where I want to go with it. Like I have all this data, I have all this information. I'm like, okay, where am I going with this? And sometimes I have to literally just start it and then I kind of figure out the path I'm going to go with it. But it's very challenging in that way.
So in another recent blog post, you talked about the 4-pillar SEO strategy, and you talked about it being really the only SEO strategy that you need. Can you dig a little deeper on this?
Yeah, quite the claim, right?
Yeah.
So that is, you're referencing my SEO strategy post. Yeah, so let me think about that because I've kind of changed that a little bit. Because
Okay.
now it's, for me, it's audit, optimize, create, and then promote. And
Okay.
that's kind of the process I show in the academy.
Okay.
The
So
SEO
yeah,
strategy. Yeah, I'll
walk us
walk
through
you.
that.
Oh, sure. So, and I've actually kind of, when I first did the academy, I was just basically throwing all the information in my mind into a course. And that was helpful for a lot of people.
Yep.
It helped a lot of people learn. But then I started to realize that a lot of my people that are joining my course are people who had clients, people who were working on campaigns. So I was like, okay, I need to really hone down and make sure this is systemized, make sure that it can be used in a scalable way. And so that's why I developed that kind of 4-step process. So the first step, audit, by far the most important thing that you can do at the beginning of any SEO campaign. Basically, that process is just literally auditing every facet of SEO. So you're going to audit their keywords, existing. That may actually involve going out and building a keyword database as well. It's kind of all in the same bucket there. Analyzing competitors, finding weaknesses in there, and then doing a technical audit. That's going to be stuff like optimizing site speed, making sure the site is mobile friendly, making sure the site has a good user experience, all that good stuff there. And then one of the main places that I focus all my time on is a content audit. And that's like my bread and butter type of situation, because I feel a lot of people kind of skip over that because it really requires the most thought. It requires the most planning. And it can be very, very difficult to figure out, what you should actually do with the information. Because anyone can go out there and fix broken links. I mean, that's not like, it doesn't require strategy in any way. But the content audit really will reveal, what you're working with the website. And usually what I'm trying to identify in a content audit is, are there pages that are thin, so low word count and aren't adding any value, outdated, anything like that? And then I make sure that there's the KPIs to back any decision I'm making. So sure, a page could have a low word count, but it could also have 100 backlinks. So then I got to kind of make a decision based on that. But in a lot of cases, if it's a thin piece of content and it's outdated, it probably doesn't have any positive signals going to it.
Yep.
So then usually I have to make the decision, are we going to delete this page? Are we going to just let it 404, don't even redirect it? Or are we going to take it and consolidate it with another post or another page? And so having to make those decisions is usually it's always based on the data. So for example, if I were to find a page that was thin and it had some quality links going to it, then I would identify a relevant page on the site and redirect it to that page. So just kind of a small example there. But one of my favorite things to do is identifying similar content assets or identifying similar pages that are usually in some type of form of keyword cannibalization, which is, one keyword, you're targeting one keyword across multiple pages, which can cause many, many problems. So usually what I do is I identify that, and then I see if I can do what I call the cake technique, which is just a fancy term for consolidating similar assets into a single mother asset.
Okay.
And that has a variety of benefits. Obviously makes the content much longer. If those pages have links, you're going to be isolating that authority onto one page. There's just a variety of things that can go on there. So that's I'm always looking for that opportunity because that's really, really golden. But yeah, so the content audit that's when I'm doing my audit, that's a lot of time is invested in that because that's usually where a lot of the quick wins are.
100%. You said something before you move on. I just wanted to address what type of situations do you not fix a 404?
I don't fix a 404 if it doesn't have links. So if it doesn't have links and it doesn't have a relevant page to redirect to, usually in that case, and obviously usually if it's a 404, it probably doesn't have traffic either. So so if it doesn't have links and it doesn't have a relevant alternative, I'm probably just going to let it 404.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
and be taken out of the index.
Yep. 100%.
So, and then yeah, after the content audit, it's probably going to be the backlink audit and offsite audit. So obviously making sure that the link profile is clean. If it's not, then we have to figure out, what to do there. And then if they're a local business, then we'll also do a local audit, which will involve auditing their Google My Business listing and auditing their citations, auditing their reviews. And so the whole purpose of this audit, it's kind of strange because you're not actually doing any work during the audit. You're just basically figuring out like, okay, what is going on here? And then it's just kind of like, you're just throwing everything out there. But then the real magic happens when you can take all of that and put it into what I call an action list. And what I do is I take all that information, I put it into a prioritized action list based on what's going to have the highest impact on the SEO campaign. So not every SEO action is created equally. So going out there and writing a unique meta description, sure, that's a necessary thing, but it's not going to have a huge impact compared to me creating a 3,000 word content asset. So, it's not all created equally, and that seems to get kind of confused with some beginners. And it's natural human tendency to focus on what's easiest. And so I have made sure to score each action based on the impact that it's going to have. So if it's a level 1 action, it's going to have a high impact. If it's a level 3 action, it's going to have a very low impact. So yeah.
Yeah, that's super valuable, especially for a newer SEO that doesn't understand the impact of any of the things, right? They just a lot of us just blindly are doing the audits to begin with. Here's an audit template, right? Oh yeah, let's add some of this other stuff, but aren't quite sure exactly the impact that fixes can make. So yeah, that's super valuable.
Yeah, so that's kind of the first stage there is the audit. And then actually one thing I skipped there is also do audit and then research, which I kind of put into a separate phase, which is going out there and building a keyword database. And now sometimes clients will already have a keyword database, but I'll still go through that process and do that. And then the other part is link prospecting. So building a huge list of link prospects. And that's going to be a variety of different link types. It's going to be link types that are non-content dependent. So it's going to be like guest posts, interviews like we're doing, Haro, that type of stuff. That's all doesn't require content. And then there are the content dependent types of links that are going to be resource pages. And then from there you can do broken link building. And there's so identifying those opportunities is important in the beginning, because that way when you actually get to that phase, you already have a nice list. And then also kind of a subset of that is actually qualifying those link opportunities as well, which I probably would do in the research phase as well. And then also with the keyword database, you also want to qualify the keywords as well. So so there's kind of a lot in there. But yeah, that's kind of like the preliminary stage is basically just laying that foundation for what you're going to be doing over the next 3 to 6, 12 months. Really, at this point in SEO campaign, you should be thinking 2 years, 3 years in advance, because it's just getting harder and harder to rank. So, and we can get into why that is later on. But yeah, that's kind of the first phase. And I don't know if you want to maybe ask some clarifying questions there, or
I don't know. I think we got it so far. That's really good. So then what happens next in the process?
So the next part of the process is, of course, usually going to be based on whatever I prioritized. But in most cases, it's going to be optimizing existing pages. And so that's what the second phase I call optimize. So we're basically doing what I said, which is consolidating pages. We're actually doing the actions that, going through that process, maybe improving existing pages, adding more content to them, improving the user experience, going through and actually fixing all the technical issues. Basically, everything that we identified in the audit is going to be what we're attacking in that second phase. And then the third phase, basically you need to get the first 2 phases right, because that's the foundation of everything. And once, you can pretty much drive traffic just by doing the first 2 phases. But then phase 3 is what I call create. So that means actually creating new assets that are going to help with the SEO performance. So there are basically 2 types of assets you can create. Number one is just a straight SEO asset, which is just an asset built around a keyword. And then there's also a linkable asset. And usually I try to combine both of those together. But in some cases, a linkable asset may not be keyword targeted. And so an example would be like Moz's Link Explorer. That's not a keyword targeted asset, but it is definitely a link asset because they get a ton of links going to it. And so it's really, really critical in phase 3 to build out these linkable assets because it's going to make phase 4 100 times easier. And so in the post I talked about earlier, I said it probably like 10 times in that blog post that you need to create linkable assets, because even if you're not buying links and you're doing the links yourself, having linkable assets, having things that are actually worth linking to is so incredibly valuable and makes your life so much easier. And so that phase 3 is dedicated to making sure that we have that base there so that when we do go out and start to acquire links, we're doing it in a natural way. We're doing it in the easiest way possible and the most scalable way possible, because content is clearly the most scalable link building strategy that you can have, because once you're actually ranking, then you get that snowball effect of people just linking to you just because you're ranking. So that's kind of a 30,000 foot view of what it is. And there's obviously a lot that has to be unpacked and a lot of nuance there. But that's kind of the process.
So with a linkable asset, let's say that we got an agency, and I'll use an example, a friend of mine. So a friend of mine has an agency. His name is Josh, and they focus exclusively on HVAC and plumbing companies, right?
Yep.
So they do a lot of on page, they do a lot of local like citation stuff, but they kind of stay away from backlinks, and they kind of let the age of the sites and the history and the on page kind of, get the wins for them. So let's say that they're in a competitive market and they need to start creating linkable assets. For them, everything that they do as an agency is very rinse and repeat, right? From one location to another, from one HVAC and plumbing company in St. Louis to the same in, South Florida, right? Like, here are the pages, here's how they're optimized, here are the keywords we're going after. I personally feel like linkable assets make a whole lot of sense as an SEO strategy, but I feel like when it comes to like doing local SEO, so to speak, for local businesses, and when you're scaling that, linkable assets are almost like a catch-22 for me, right? Like, how can I get a win and an ROI as an SEO agency with a linkable asset, right? When focusing on local businesses.
Yeah, so when it's a local business, you have to kind of change your mindset of what the purpose of the linkable asset is. So, when you tell a lawyer or an HVAC company that they have to create a linkable asset, they're gonna be like, why? Why do we have to create it? That's not the page you want to rank. That's not what the page you want to drive traffic to. And it's kind of a hard thing to wrap your mind around. But the purpose of a linkable asset on the local level is purely to build the overall website authority. And the fastest way to build the website authority is to drive links to a linkable asset. And that will grow. And I love the quote that a rising tide lifts all ships. And that's the way I think about it. So when you're driving links to those assets, it just makes everything easier. And your local rankings will increase as the website authority grows. And you're doing it in a natural way, because driving links to a lead capture page for a St. Louis plumber, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And if it doesn't make sense to me, it definitely doesn't make sense to Google, because they have far more resources than I do to be able to come to that conclusion. And so first, figuring out what is the point of even doing it is the first step. But then actually execution wise, usually the way that I did, and I'm glad you brought up an HVAC company, because I did work with a few HVAC companies where I actually implemented this exact strategy. Actually one in St. Louis. But what we did is we identified keywords that were on the national level. So general keywords about HVAC that we could go after to establish this company as the authority in HVAC. And I'd have to go back and look exactly what they were. But they were pretty specific about specific problems dealing with air conditioning units and furnaces and things like that. And so what we did is we just created a really in-depth asset around those more general national keywords, and then we just drove a ton of links to those, and their rankings climbed. So, and that's just kind of how we go about it. So it's either going to be identifying a more national driven keyword and then using that as the vehicle for acquiring links, or doing something a little more advanced if it makes sense. But usually in most cases, it's going to be, identifying a keyword. And like I mentioned earlier, data is always like the best thing that you can leverage in most industries, because there's pretty much always data or research that you can find. And if there isn't, then you can create your own. Kind of like what I did in my last post. That was basically me just creating data out of thin air. So
do you have any good examples of any kind of broad kind of linkable assets that people could create that they could kind of swipe and deploy? So I know, like, for us, like, we've done the whole, like, we've done some drone shoots of different towns, right? And then we've done outreach in those towns, right? And said, hey, Mr. Realtor, like, you're using all these crappy images, right? Here's some of the best spots, just link to us, right? And just gotten attribution for the images, and that's been good. But no crazy volume, but good quality natural links, so to speak.
yeah.
Any other kind of thoughts on linkable assets, maybe for local specifically?
I think that's a great idea, and I also think having realistic expectations is important too, because in our industry, you see like someone like me or someone like Brian Dean create some sort of asset, and it gets like 2,000 referring domains. That is not going to happen in most industries, and so you have to keep in mind how linkable certain industries are. Obviously, the SEO, internet marketing, people are very link happy. But finding that same behavior in HVAC, you are not going to find it. So establishing, you're not going to get thousands of links from these assets. But yeah, for me, I 99% of the time, I'm just going to find a keyword and create the best asset I can around that keyword. And then I'm going to go out there and promote it. Usually going to be through guest post opportunities, maybe a little direct promotion of the actual asset to some individuals if it makes sense, but usually it's going to be more like leveraging non-content dependent link building tactics to promote the linkable asset, which seems bizarre, but that's just kind of the way it ends up being. And that's the most reliable way for me to acquire links to it. Especially when a client's like, okay, what did you do this month? Well, it's like, well, hey, I promoted this asset to a bunch of people and no one linked to it. So
great job.
So you can't really do that. So you have to really focus on the things that are most reliable. And then over time, that asset will likely start to acquire those natural links, given enough patience and enough time.
100%.
So,
and especially as it starts to rank, right? And once it starts to rank for some of those bigger keywords, it's going to kind of naturally, if you're going after national keywords and it's ranking for it, definitely is going to, have the ability to get links automatically and have that snowball effect.
Exactly. And it's kind of funny too, because out of the gate, clients are very resistant to the idea of like targeting more general national driven keywords. But when you rank for them and they start seeing that traffic, they're like, oh man, this is awesome, because it is building their brand. It may not result in direct sales like it would for a local query, but it is building their brand. It is establishing them as an authority, and that all it benefits them. So, and obviously I'm doing it for the SEO purposes, but it does have some other side effects as well, positive side effects.
When you do an outreach for local campaigns specifically, any tips, tricks, thoughts, best practices?
Depending on what I'm doing. So are you talking about promoting an asset or getting a guest post, or?
Let's say either, right? Like, what are your favorite go-to tactics?
Yeah, I love when people ask me that. And actually in the academy too, I say this, but I don't really do a lot of like tactics when it comes to outreach. It's usually very, very straightforward. Like, my only tactic is thinking about what would I want in a pitch. And so I get a lot of pitches and I ignore 99% of them, because usually people try to go from not knowing me to wanting to go on a date. And it doesn't work there. So, but at the same time, you don't want to waste people's time, right? So no one wants to go through this super long outreach process where you're like building up this like fake relationship where they know at the end you're just going to ask them for something. It's like, so for me, I just immediately tell them what I want out of the gate. Usually first email right away, like, hey, I'm interested in guest posting on your site. Here are 3 ideas that I think would be a good fit. I haven't found it anywhere else on your site. And that's usually it. Something of that nature, very straightforward. Obviously, coming from a real person, a real sender, making sure you're not using a free email address, stuff like that. And then some more tactical stuff, like I don't usually send more than like 50 outreach emails per day. That's probably like the max I would do. Don't want to fry my email address. And
you
then
don't need more than, you definitely don't need more than that if you got a good pitch.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it's usually just being very, very forward with what I'm interested in, and then most importantly, establishing what value they're going to get out of the situation. And sometimes, obviously the biggest and the highest value that you can give someone is money. And that it really does talk when it comes to outreach. And so usually, I'll say something at the end that says, we're willing to compensate you for this placement if that's what you're looking for. And so people just don't want to waste their time really. So that's usually my strategy, is just to get right to it, show them a real person. And that's really about it. So
yeah, for most of the local campaigns, definitely that we're definitely running more, I guess you would say, sponsored posts than guest posts, right? Because we are, it's transactional, because for us to spend all kinds of crazy amount of time to build out, 3 weeks to build out a content post, like it just doesn't, a crazy piece of content, it just doesn't translate for the customer. So, we're still finding really good quality sites, but at the end of the day, I believe that most of them are kind of under monetized, right? And the easiest way to their heart is just giving them, like you said, what they want.
Totally agree with that.
For us, for me internally at Digital Triggers, and for helping people with their SEO at scale for local, the big win has just been mommy blogs with guest posts. And really mommy blogs with sponsored posts, right? Because most of them are truly under monetized. And to find somebody locally that's a mom that's blogging, like they would love the opportunity to get paid whatever you're going to pay them, right? Like, and they'd be stoked about it, and you would make an actual change in their life. Like, it's a big deal. It's a big win.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Yeah, especially when you can identify those local opportunities too. A lot of those bloggers are making a ton of money, and so anything is a big deal for them. So, and I will say the one nuance when it comes to outreach is, like, when you're doing it at scale and you're targeting kind of like lower authority opportunities, it makes sense to be just like very forward, right to the point, like, hey, this is what we got. But if you're dealing with people like that have like serious influence in a particular niche, you're gonna want to build it up a little bit. Don't just like, try to go crazy right away. So that is kind of a slight nuance there. You want to build those relationships in a much slower way over time. So
100%. But I think you're right. Like, at the end of the day, you just got to put yourself in that person's shoes, and what would you want, right? Like, is ultimately what you have to ask yourself. And so as long as you're doing your research right, as long as you're making your pitch right, like I don't think there's any problem with getting straight to the point.
Yeah, and as long as there's a clear exchange of value. That's the thing I try to always emphasize. There has to be equal value on both sides. In fact, there should probably be more value for the person that's doing you the favor. So, 100%. You just pitching a guest post, like, sure, that is valuable for them because you are adding content to their website, but anything that you can add to make that pitch a slightly more valuable is going to be beneficial in some way. So that's usually why I do guest posts plus a financial incentive as well, because I'm stacking on that value for them, because really I'm the one asking for a favor at the end of the day.
So I'm curious, when inside the academy, when you teach people to do outreach and guest posts or sponsored posts, let's say it's sponsored posts, or making a financial incentive, do you teach them to write the content? Do you teach them to outsource that content? How do you deal with kind of the quality control, right, so to speak, on that content creative? I know some people using like iWriter, and pumping out guest posts, and they get away with it, so to speak, because they're paying for it, right? And I know that at times we've had some questionable content. I mean, it wasn't crap, but it wasn't very good, good either.
Yeah. I teach both ways. So obviously, DIYing it is one way, but obviously going out there and trying to systemize it and trying to acquire as many as possible is something I teach as well. And usually, this is just in my experience, and everyone obviously has different experience, but hiring a writer or several writers to take on that content is usually better in my experience. There are some services like I've tested Fat Joe's content services many times, really good content. The only challenge is they usually write in UK based English. So you have to kind of change that up a little bit of editing, but for the price, pretty solid. But for the most part, I've always had better experience with individual writers, but they are more expensive. So you got to kind of weigh the pros and the cons of that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for me, I know like we're doing it, I mean, at scale for us, but I'm sure, compared to what you were doing, probably not at scale. But for us, like it's just a detail that I don't want to worry about. So we work with a content shop, right, that handles everything from A to Z. We pick the topic, we get it approved, right? We pitch it, we get it approved, and then like their editors are really good. Like every time I get it, it looks flawless. Like if I was the person accepting the content or looking at the content, I'd be like, yes, please, like send us more. And that's really for me what it's about, is like securing those relationships and making the bloggers happy so that they want to work with us in the future.
yeah, and then that's the nice thing about working with or using services is you're basically just piggybacking off the infrastructure that they've already built. So
Exactly.
that's really something that I do recommend a lot of the students. And I will say one nuance about the guest posting
Yep.
is, and this is something that's really been working well for me because I've been doing a ton of outreach for a couple niche sites that I'm working on.
Yep.
But what I've been doing is I've been sending the guest post pitch. So just a traditional guest post pitch with 3 ideas, the classic one you've seen. And then a lot of the time they'll respond with, okay, this is my price per post. And I'm like, okay, this is your price per post. So then what I do is I go back to their blog and I research pages that are relevant to whatever my linkable page is. And I say, hey, well, I just noticed this page. Would you be interested in just me paying you? And then you can place that link in this article. Because then I don't even have to create any content, and it's actually easier for them too. And so that's one little workaround I've been doing. It's actually been very effective, and obviously from a time investment and resource perspective, much more effective. It doesn't always work, but it's definitely something to try. If you get that opportunity.
It's almost like a niche edit, so to speak, right? Would be the right term for it. So it's like they say yes to a guest post or sponsored post and they give you a price. And instead of just going and writing the piece, right, you just turn around and you're like, hey, actually, I found this piece of content. Would you just link to me in this piece and I'll pay you that fee?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's been working very well. And I mean, it kind of makes sense for both sides too, because they don't want to go through the time investment of uploading a post and formatting a post and doing all that either. So it is a good little tactic for sure.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, that's something that I can see us using like immediately, right? And I mean, that cuts out our content piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Our content costs. So there goes, $25-$30 in terms of content, right? Cuts that right off the top. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, and you're also getting a link. You're also getting a link in an aged piece of content as well, which is also nice. So, when you get a guest post, it's a brand new asset. It has no age. It has probably very little trust. And so even if you get a link on a page on a website that has no links going to that specific page, it's still been there. It's still aged. And so it probably has a little bit more trust than a brand new asset. So,
gotcha. What are your thoughts on reciprocal linking, right? When you're pitching somebody and they're like, yeah, but right, I'd like a link as well. Like, I feel like this used to be obviously such a huge topic, reciprocal linking, right? But I feel like, nobody's talking about it these days. So if they request a link as well, right, or a swap, like what's your thought process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I pretty much only ever consider it if the other person has a very strong website. And that's usually the only exception. And so I've had a few people pitch me on various things and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it, but I want to make sure I'm getting a link to my site, So, but the kind of those lower grade opportunities, from like DA 10 to DA 40 or whatever DA, DR, whatever third party metric you want to use. I probably wouldn't be doing a lot of that type of stuff. And if that's what they're asking for, then I would just kind of change the angle and say, okay, I don't really want to do that, but maybe we'll pay you a little bit more to get the placement. So just a little negotiation, if anything.
For sure.
So
yeah, I've actually been seeing it like at Digital Triggers, for example. So we're getting a lot of people hitting us up, pitching us links all the time. Let us write a piece of content, or let's do a sponsored post, or how can we get a link? And so we've just been playing with the responses to see, like, again, you said it best, but like, what's in it for me? Like, I don't care about $100 for a sponsored post or whatever you're going to pay me. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, but we've been getting some influential names. Like, if I drop the names, like, everybody would know the names here. And they're the same email pitches that we give people and we say work, and and they're the same exact ones from huge names. And I'm like, really? Like, this is the best that you can do? Like, this is what I do, and I'm an amateur at this thing. And so we've just been playing with the responses, and I've just been asking, like, quite frankly, like, what's in it for us? You going to swap links with us? And I mean, sites with way more authority than us, and they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. What makes sense, right? And like, they're not just going to put a link in a piece of content if it doesn't make sense, right? Which is good. I don't want that. But I'm seeing a lot of kind of reciprocal linking at the moment actually working really well.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example, which I don't know if I should probably be sharing this, but hey, it might help. So have you heard of Mailshake?
Yeah.
The outreach company? Yeah, so they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we found this blog post, and I think it was my backlinks article. And they're like, hey, we have this outreach thing, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty relevant to what my asset is. It's about link building, it's about outreach. And they're like, hey, so if you place our link in this, we can get you a link on HubSpot. And I was like, okay, like that's a legit exchange of value right there, because getting a link on HubSpot is very hard to get. And I already have a couple links, but I just know the value of getting a link on a website like that. Yep. And so that was a totally fair exchange in that situation. And I did go through with that. But it's not like, they just injected some link into HubSpot. Like, it was a legit thing. I had to give my take on a specific thing about SEO, and there was a little bit of work involved, but it was definitely worth it to invest just a little bit of time to get featured on HubSpot, which is a very powerful domain. So
100%.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that. Like, Mailshake wasn't the one that reached out to me, but in the cold email game, we've had a lot of people hitting us up, from like, how do you find somebody's email and tools like that, to tools that you could say are competitors to Mailshake or very similar. And they've all been willing to kind of play ball, so to speak. And so, yeah, some nice, easy win-wins that I've been negotiating off of inbound pitches. So that's been interesting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't see the problem with it, because it's just business. So it's just an exchange of value. So I don't see the issue with it. No one's paying for links. I didn't pay for anything. So, and that's what's against Google's guidelines. So, not a big deal in my opinion. So
yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Cool, man. So we've talked a lot so far, and I want to just thank you first and foremost. Lots of value. Appreciate it, man. Anything that you're thinking that we're missing? We got a couple minutes left. Anything that you think that we're missing for everybody here?
Man,
I got the infamous, last podcast question, relating to a book that everybody asks, but slightly different take today.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say that's pretty much it. I would say that the big thing that I would say to invest a lot of resources and time in is creating content assets, because really at the end of the day, that's going to be the foundation that holds an SEO campaign together. And that even applies on the local level too, because I know some local businesses think they can get away with not creating content, but just think about it this way. Most local businesses are not creating content. So if you are the local business that steps up and becomes the authority in your space, at least on the local level, maybe even nationally, you're just going to dominate everyone in your local area. So
nobody's gonna be able to keep up, for sure.
No, and how can like, one plumber beat someone who's, it's just not possible. These companies are too small in a lot of cases, and they just don't want to do it. I mean, they literally just don't want to do it. They're fine with their revenue numbers, and that's all cool. So, but yeah, if you become the company that decides to step up and create those long-term assets, you will definitely benefit from it.
All right. So last question to wrap this thing up. So when you look at your business, what's the one book that's made the biggest impact on your business? Like that you can directly correlate. I learned this in this book, and then it actually went into my business. Not like that was a feel good book and I got to win. Like I got some takeaways, but I haven't done anything yet. Like things that you know that you implemented from a book, I guess.
Yeah. If I had to pick just one, I would probably have to say cash advertising. And the reason is because I've referred to that book so many times. Like every time I reopen the Academy, I pull that book out and I do a review of what's in that book because I want to get my mind in the right place about,
Yep.
obviously persuading in the right way. And then if you stack Influence, the old school book, with that, those are very, very similar books.
Yep.
So usually those are the two that like I'm trying to get my mindset right with. But there's so many, but those two really are. I mean, if you just had those two books, you could really do a lot in business. That's my opinion.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Awesome. I actually haven't read Cash Advertising, so that'll be a good one. I'll have to get after that right away.
And it's a type of book where like you need to go through it and like put it down and then go back to it like a week later and go through it again, because every time I've probably gone through it now, honestly, probably at least 5 times. And every time I go through, I see something new and it's not because like I didn't read it. It's just because I'm at a different stage now. So now that I understand it now based on my situation. And before I was just, a noob, so I didn't really know what was going on. There's too many things for me to figure out. So I couldn't like truly execute on the information. So definitely one to be read and reread for sure.
Yeah. So where would you say you're most active on social? If somebody wants to reach out, they want to follow you, where you at? Obviously, we'll link up in the show notes, the GOTCH SEO, but any other honorable mentions, so to speak, or places we should link up?
Honestly, I'm probably most active on Facebook. But I really only publish on social when I have really something like valuable to share. So I'm definitely not going to be like Gary Vaynerchucking you across your feed. But yeah, I mean, probably Facebook, Twitter, those are probably the 2 channels.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for coming on. So much value. I'm sure that our crew is going to take away so much from this. I really appreciate you coming on and being here, man.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. See you guys. Have an awesome, awesome day. We'll catch you on the next episode of Show Me the Nuggets.